Hello and welcome. In this video we'll be looking at Adobe Illustrator and how we can design a map using the software. So first what we want to do is create a new project. So I'm going to create a new document and I want to make sure that I set this to be print, A4, with the orientation set to landscape, and I'm just going to make sure that my color mode is set to CMYK and hit create. I'm now going to go up to my window and make sure that my workspace is set to Essentials, and I'm also then going to make sure that my panels are expanded like so I can clearly see everything that is on offer. So now we have our blank document. I'm going to now import my map image. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to find my map image. So in this case I just took a screenshot from Google Earth and I'm going to place that into my scene. And you'll see I've got this little preview of the map icon following my mouse cursor. If I simply just click into my document, it should place it. I now want to position this into my scene, and holding Alt and the mouse wheel I can zoom out, and holding Shift whilst dragging the edges will keep everything to the same proportion. So I'm just going to minimize this to be towards the width of my workspace. Holding space whilst mouse dragging allows you to move around. And I'm just going to go to my layers panel, double click on the name layer 1, and I'm just going to rename this to be my base map. Like so. And I'm going to hit this little box next to the eye just to lock it, because we won't want to be accidentally selecting this or changing this whilst we do our design. So now we have that created. I'm just going to create a new layer by clicking this little layer icon down the bottom. I'm going to rename this new layer to be Waterway, like so. And I'm going to select my pen tool, and I'm going to make sure that I swap the fill and the stroke around. So I've got the fill is made sure my fill is black, like so. And I just want to make sure this is black, and I'm going to make sure my fill has no color selected by just double clicking on it and selecting the none option. So this will mean when I draw my path, it won't try and fill it in for me. And all I'm going to simply do is start tracing over my water's edge. So I'm going to go from this corner here to this corner over here. I'm just going to click and start drawing these little points. If I click and hold, I can add curves. So I'm just trying to trace this as good as I can, and obviously the more time you spend on this, the better your result will be. So taking time is important. I can zoom in again, like I said, using the Alt and the mouse wheel just to make my life a bit easier, and using the space bar to pan around. So again, it's just taking it slowly in small increments, and we'll finish it there. And to stop drawing, I simply just select another tool like so, and that will now stop and confirm my selection. So if I want to adjust any of these points, I can simply use my point tool. So if it's not selected, I can select this little 3 ellipse buttons here just to enable it. But as you see, my anchor pen point tool is actually currently a part of my pen tool selection, so I can click and hold on my pen tool to bring up the anchor point tool, like so. And then I can simply select any of these points and I can basically now convert these to be softer edges. So if I click it once, it makes it into a harsh edge. If I click it again, it'll make it into a soft edge. So I can click and drag to make it into a soft edge like so. And now I'm going to just finish off and do the rest of the waterways, and I will fast forward through this bit for you. I'm not going to do these waterways up here and down here because I think we've got enough to work from for now. But obviously if you have more time you can do the rest of them as you see fit. I've just chosen to do this area here and this little river here just because they are close to each other, and I'm going to try and centralise all my work within this sort of region. So to look at my water layer on its own, I can simply click on the eye on my base map to turn it off, so I can now just see my water layer. And I want to now fill in where the Brayford Pool is, which is this body of water here. I'm going to go turn my base map back on just to make sure that I am in the right area, which I am. And to draw the pool, I simply need to just select this layer and draw over the top of what I've done before. Now, what I'm going to do actually to make my life easier is I'm going to simply create a new layer and just rename this layer to be pool. Otherwise, I have the option, potential to accidentally delete my points by just using a pen tool on top of its previous layer. And I'm just going to lock my waterway layer for now, so I don't accidentally select it or draw onto that layer. Because the way this works, unlike Photoshop, is when you're creating your design, everything that you draw on the same layer will become a path, and they will be nestled into this individual layer. So you can accidentally draw everything onto the same layer, so to speak, without them actually interfering with each other. But to make life easier, it's easier to segment things into more appropriate areas where possible. So I'm just going to trace over the path I've previously created, and you'll find it'll try and snap to some of these points as we go along. I'm just going to zoom in. And I'm going to fix the overlapping strokes in a bit. So again, we're just drawing around pool, adding points as we need to. And if I want to make sure go from a curved edge to a straight edge, I'll just simply select the last point, and by clicking on it again with the pen tool, that now will make the last point into a straight edge. And just join all that up like so. And now I'm going to make sure that its fill is an appropriate blue. So I'm going to pick a nice blue colour, like so, and then I'm just going to hit this little switch here to make sure that I have a fill but no stroke. And now if I drag my pool layer below my waterway layer, like so, I should have the edge now drawn and the water shown. I'm actually going to adjust my waterway colour, so I'm going to select my path, like so, and I can select all my paths by holding shift while selecting multiple path shapes like this. I can double click on the colour at any time and choose the colour I want. I'm going to actually use the eyedropper tool to select the water colour I've already used, and I'm just going to make sure that that is only set to be the path, so I've flipped that around. And if I want to change my width of my paths at any point, I can just simply click on that path and adjust its stroke by, like so, by increasing its point size. And I'm going to do that on some of these waterways like this, keeping this one quite thin in comparison. And if at any point I'm not happy with any of my points, I can always use the white arrow, which is a direct select tool, to select any of those points along that line and maneuver them so they are more appropriate. And that's a great thing about Illustrator, is you can always come back in and tweak any of your drawings or designs without them being rasterized. And again, the more time you spend on this, the better your result will be. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually select my waterway and my pool layer. and I'm going to drag my pool path, so the shape I've just drawn in my pool path, and I'm going to drag that onto my waterway layer below all of my other paths. And then I'm actually going to now delete my pool layer by selecting the pool layer and hitting the little trash can icon at the bottom to delete that selection. And the reason I did it that way is it means when I'm drawing out the pool, it just made it easy for me to be able to draw that path without interfering with my other lines. You don't have to do it that way. You could just draw your path directly onto your waterway layer and just lock all the other paths so you don't accidentally delete them or interfere with them. This is down to the way that you prefer working. So I'm just going to again create another new layer. I'm just going to rename this new layer Railway, and you can kind of guess what we're going to be creating next. And with my railway layer selected, I'm just going to again select the pen tool. I'm going to make sure that my outline is black, so my stroke is black. And now I'm going to follow one of my rail lines. I'm not going to draw all of them because there's a lot of them. So I'm just going to draw along using the pen tool again, following the path of our railway line. And again, the more time you spend on this, the more accurate your result will be. And I'm doing this fairly fast, so it won't be super accurate. And there we go. So that is going to become my railway line. And I'm now going to need to create a pattern brush. So at the moment, this railway line doesn't represent what we would expect a railway line to look like on a map. So what we need to do is we need to create a custom brush for this path to adhere to. So I'm just going to go to my side of my artboard, and I'm just going to turn on my grid by going to View, Show Grid, just so I can see these little squares. And I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to pick out one of these squares to use as a reference for my pattern brush. And to create that, I'm going to just select my pen tool again outside of my artboard area, and I'm just going to draw a straight line from top to bottom of one of these squares. To keep my line straight, I can hold Shift and click and then release Shift, and that will create a perfectly straight line for you. I'm now going to go to my brushes window, and if your brushes window isn't currently part of your setup, we can always go to Window, Brushes, and I'm just going to dock this by clicking and dragging this over to my side panel like so until I get this blue outline, and release, and that will now dock it into my little panel. Just going to expand this out a bit and move his colours down a bit there. So to create a new brush, with my brushes panel open, I select my path. So in this case, it's this line here. I go over to New Brush, which is this little icon down here, which is previously New Layer. So it's a little piece of paper. I select that. I want to select a pattern brush and hit OK. And you'll notice it's taken that path and created this sort of line. So I just need to adjust some settings here. So I'm going to select the name to be Rail. I'm going to change its spacing to be 500%. I'm going to change its corner here to be an auto-centered angular. So I have this kind of diagonal line. And I'm going to do the same with the other angle here. So you should have something that has diagonal line, straight line, diagonal line. I'm going to adjust its scale, which is this one here, to be 50%. 50% like so. I'm going to turn flip along on and flip across on as well. And add space to fit. And then I can click OK. And I want to apply this to strokes. There we go. So you now notice my path has now got these two lines instead of it being the straight line I had previously. And this is how we can create our custom brushes. I'm just going to delete that now because I don't need to have that outside my artboard now. And now if I select my railway path and choose the rail brush I've created, you should notice that now our straight line path has now changed to represent railway sleepers. Now, because I know for a fact that this railway line actually goes above the river, this is fine. If this wasn't the case and this actually went below a river or road, I would need to obviously adjust the layer position of this path by just moving it a layer below the layer I want to be on top. But for this is fine. I'm now going to lock my railway layer and waterway layer, making sure they are out of the way so I can't accidentally select them. And I'm now going to start creating my green zones. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this green space. And I'm now going to draw and trace over our green fields. So again, using the pen tool, making sure I've got the black brush selected for now. I'm just going to draw over the edges of our shape. And again, the more time you spend on this, the better your result will be. I'm just going to do this for a few of the green areas on my map. There we go. So now I have outlined some of the green areas in Lincoln on the map. And I'm just going to go to Window, and I'm going to open up my colour guide. So I'm just going to select my one of my paths here. I'm just going to choose a fill that is a appropriate green. And I can use this colour guide to choose shades of that colour, and it will give me appropriate colours that it thinks are matching as part of that palette or harmony. I'm just making sure that my outline is not on. So I'm just going to select all of my green areas, and I can hold Shift just to select all those shapes. Select my green and making sure that my outline is off. And now I should have a fields of green on my map. Now we've got all these green fields on there. I now want to create a pattern that goes over these to best to represent grass. So I'm going to just select all these by, again, holding Shift and selecting each of these shapes. I'm going to hit Command and C or Control C to copy. Then I'm going to go to Edit and Paste in Place to basically create a copy of those on top of the fields underneath. So now with those selected, I'm going to have to apply a texture. So I want to go to swatches, and again, if swatches isn't apparent, you go to Window, and you can always enable it from the Window option. I'm going to go to this little hamburger menu here, and I'm going to open my swatches library. So it's Open Swatch Library, and I'm going to go to Patterns, Basic Graphics, and Basic Dots. And this will give us a variety of dot patterns that we can choose from. And I'm just going to choose the first one, like so. And I want to make sure that that dot pattern is applied to my fill, not to my stroke. If it accidentally does it to stroke, flip your layer and just again make sure that your stroke is disabled. And now you should have a series of black dots over the top of your parks. So now we have created that. I'm going to go back to my layers tab, and I'm just going to close that window like so, because I don't want that in my way. And again, we're going to create another new layer, and we're going to rename this Main Roads, and I'm going to just lock my green space layer. So again, I don't accidentally interfere with my own work whilst I'm doing this, because that is very easy to do. So it's all about making sure you're only enabling the layout that you're working on to make your life easier, rather than accidentally potentially cutting into your work and causing headaches later on. So with the main road selected, I'm just going to again select my pen tool. I'm going to make sure I have no fill. I'm going to go to my stroke and give it a solid colour, and I'm just going to, for now, choose black, and we can always change the colour of that later. And I'm just going to go to properties also before I continue and increase my stroke to be 4. Now, because the roads aren't closed shapes, I am going to have to keep deselecting my pen tool after I've finished each part of the path. Otherwise, I can accidentally start deleting parts of my path points that I've created. So I'm just going to choose the topmost edge here, for example. To make my life easier, I'm just going to turn my green space layer off so I can see the road that cuts through it. And again, I'm just going to trace my yellow roads across the map. And again, the more time you spend on this, the better. And a combination of Alt and scrolling in and clicking and holding or releasing will make your paths easy to create. Up here, where you can see where this road actually goes off, I'm actually just going to pull that point off my art canvas. Same with this point here, because I'd rather the paths go off the artboard rather than cutting at the edges. So just making sure that I just select all my paths and just make sure they go off a little bit more than I need them to, because I can always clip those off at the end. So if you see any paths that don't quite go off the edges for these bits, this might be the time to go and fix that. So now I have the main roads, which is the thick yellow lines on this map. I'm now going to do exactly the same with the secondary roads. So again, I'm just going to lock this layer, and I'm just going to create another new layer. Rename this new layer to be secondary roads, and I'm just going to again trace some of the thicker white lines to create my secondary roads. And again, you can do as many of these as you feel comfortable with. I'm not going to do all of them because there are so many roads here, but again, just enough to illustrate the point. I'm actually going to make sure that the secondary roads are a thinner width, so I'm actually just going to adjust the stroke to be 2 instead of 4. If at any point I'm not happy with any of my points, I can use my pen tool, path selected. So I'm just going to select my path, get my pen tool, and I can just remove them, and you can see this little negative line. So the remove tool next to it, so if I click on that, it would remove that point. If I click my pen tool anywhere along that path, it will add a point. And then I can always use my direct select tool to adjust those points on that path afterwards. So the white arrow is for selecting our points, our black arrow is for selecting everything on that layer, or connected to each other essentially. Okay, now I've drawn my secondary roads. I could, if I wanted to, also do the tertiary roads. I'm not going to do that because this would be a logistical nightmare to draw that in the time we have allocated. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to now draw a new layer to highlight the university campus. So I'm just going to again go to my layers. I'm just going to close this window for now. And down here you see again we're going to create another new layer. I'm just going to rename this layer Campus. And we want to draw a shape that kind of illustrates the campus area. So with the pen tool selected again, we're going to just draw around the size of the campus. I'm going to just lock my secondary roads, so again I don't accidentally delete points whilst doing this. And you'll find that the campus tends to run on both sides of the track, so we're just going to go across here like this, and we're going to use the railway line and the water's edge as a kind of points of where the campus ends. So using your own knowledge of this area, you can do this. And if I go into the water, that's fine. I'd rather kind of go into the water than be too much to the edge of the water, because our water layer is always going to cover up any little blemishes we make here anyway. So down to Student Village. And I am kind of eyeballing this a little bit. But again, the more time you spend on this, you'd be able to do a better job than what I'm currently doing. There you go. So I've just drawn a rough outline of the campus. I'm going to give it a fill, and the fill colour I'm going to go with, for now, I'm just going to choose a colour I haven't used elsewhere, so I'm just going to use a red just so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to turn the path off. And this is just so I've got an idea of whether my shape looks roughly correct. And again, this isn't necessarily going to be accurate. This is just a rough shape for the campus. Again, use your own knowledge to do a better job of that. So with our campus selected, I'm going to go back to my swatches panel. So window, swatches. I'm going to choose the little hamburger menu again, this little 3-line menu here. I'm going to again open my swatch library, go to patterns, basic graphics, and basic graphics textures. And we're going to choose the hatches swatch, which is this one here. So hatching, making sure that we have our fill selected. There we go. So we now should have this sort of hatched pattern over the rough area of the campus. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually now going to start tidying up our layers, so I can now turn my base map off. I'm going to make sure that my campus is below my waterway, so the water actually goes over the edges, which is what it should do. So I'm going to make sure that my campus is almost on my bottom layer and everything else goes above it. I'm also going to now reselect my main roads, and I'm just going to choose a new colour for these paths to make it more visibly identifiable. So I'm going to select that entire layer by selecting this little box here, and I'm just going to choose a new stroke colour, and I'm just going to choose a darkish yellow. And for my secondary roads, again I'm going to select all my secondary roads, and I'm just going to choose again another colour that I think is within a similar colour vein but not the same, and I'm just going to go with a lighter yellow for those. And I'm going to make sure my secondary roads are below my main roads, so again it hides any of the overlaps that could be occurring, like so. And now we should be able to see just the elements that we've created by having our base map turned off. And this is our rough map created. Now this map at the moment has no context, so to do that we're going to need to start to create some symbols to identify landmarks within this space. So to do that I'm just going to again lock all these layers just so I don't accidentally move anything or delete anything at the moment. And I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this new layer symbols. And with my grid still selected, so you notice I've kept my grid on, so if it's not on for you, you can just go to View and Show Grid. So I can always toggle the grid on or off. And I'm going to use this grid as reference for creating our symbols. So I'm just going to zoom in to a space off our artboard. So somewhere over here in the dark, not on our canvas area. And I'm just going to draw a castle. So to do that, I'm just going to use the shape tool. So I'm going to use a rectangle. And I'm going to create a castle icon. And I'm going to roughly make it 4 by 4. If I hold shift, it'll create a perfect square, like so. Making sure that our stroke is again off, but we have a solid black fill. There we go. So this will be the shape of which we're going to use to create our castle. And if you know anything about castles, they have little parapets. So again, using the rectangle, I'm going to drag and draw some little parapets onto my shape. And you can see these little helpful pink lines that kind of indicate it being in line with each other. If those aren't enabled, you can turn them on by using the smart grids in the view panel. I'm just going to make sure that this is perfectly centered. So the middle rectangle I can drag, and with smart grids turned on, it'll give me these two little pink indicators that say 1.3783 for me, and it's perfectly spaced on either side like that. And now I want to also create a little doorway. So to do that, I'm going to, again, using the rectangle tool, I'm just going to create a white fill so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to draw a rectangle and make sure that this is perfectly in the center of my shape. And I'm going to try and keep its width to the same width as what I've used for my parapet. And I'm also now going to draw a white circle, so using the ellipse. To create a perfect circle, I hold shift whilst drawing. So this will create a circle, so we should now have a rectangle and a circle shape. I want to position my circle so it's halfway on the top of our rectangle. So we should have this sort of shape created, which looks like an archway. I'm going to go to Window and open up my Pathfinder window. And I'm just going to dock this over here. And again, you can dock these as to how you feel comfortable. I just want to make this here so I don't have it floating around. And I'm going to select all of my black rectangles by again selecting one and holding shift and selecting the others. And I can make sure that they are all selected by dropping down the drop down panel on my symbols layer, and I should see that all of my rectangles have this little indicator next to them to say that they are selected. With my Pathfinder window, I have this option here called Merge or Unite. So I use the Unite option, and it should now create a solid shape of that path. And I'm also going to do the same with my two white shapes. Just merge those two together, so I should have two paths on my symbol layer now. With my white layer selected above my black layer, I'm going to select both my paths, and then I'm going to use the minus front option, and that should now cut my white shape out of my black shape, and I should now have this sort of castle symbol here. I now want to drag this castle shape that I've created, and I'm now going to position this to where the castle is on the map. So using my base map, I'm just going to position this to roughly where it is, and I'm now going to hold shift to scale this down. So Alt will scale things around its center. If I hold shift whilst holding Alt, it'll scale everything in proportion around its center. And now we have our little castle icon. I'm just going to squash it a little bit because I think I've made it a bit too tall. There we go. And I've positioned this to be where Lincoln Castle is on this map. So now we have a symbol on our map, and we could create more symbols, and we'll probably do that again later. I'm just going to lock this layer for now, create another new layer, and we're going to need to start giving our roads some names. Because what are the use of roads if we don't know what they are called on a map? So with this road layer selected, and now I need to draw a path along the road that I want to give a name to. So I'm just going to choose this one here, Rugby Road, and I'm just going to draw a line along that path, like so. So I should have this straight line or this path that I've drawn along that edge. So with my text along path tool selected, or type on path tool selected, I want to just double click on that and I'll be able to bring up the options. I'm just going to select somewhere on this path first, so I'm going to start it here, and it'll just put some lower mipsin in, and now I need to adjust the settings of this, so I'm just going to double click on the type along path tool, and I'm going to change some settings here. So I'm going to change the align along path to be a descender, and I'm going to hit preview so I can see what's happening. I'm actually also going to flip it, so I want this name to be above the road, and vice versa. If it's the other way around, I would obviously not have it enabled if I wanted it to be below. And I'm just going to hit OK, and now I'm just going to type in the name of this road. So this is Rugby Road, and I can change the font and height values down here. So if I'm not having my font size, I can always change what is here. If I was to add another name, so I'm just going to choose another road, one that's got a bit more curvature to it. So let's look for one that I could use that'd be appropriate. So let's say I wanted to have this name Monks Road follow along this edge here with my road name selected and my pen tool selected again. I'm just going to again draw a path along that edge, making sure that my fill is off, and I'm also going to turn my stroke off because I don't want any stroke color. I just want the path, not the fill. So making sure that when we draw these paths for our names that we're keeping the fill and stroke off. I'm going to use the type on a path tool again, select somewhere along my path that I want the text to begin, and just type in the name of my road. And again, if I want to adjust the settings, I can double click on it, make sure it is set to be a descender. In this case I've actually got it the right way around. If I didn't, I would make sure I had flip turned on. I can always adjust the spacing if I wanted to. I'm just going to keep it on auto. Hit OK. And if I want to move the start and end points of this, I can, using the white arrow, I can click and drag these arrows here. So you sort of see this straight line with this white box next to it. With the white tool selected, I can click and drag that to move the start position, and vice versa with the end, as long as my path has enough space to do so, which in this case it doesn't. So I'm just going to highlight this to show you how you can maneuver your text along your path post positioning it or creating it. There we go. And again, my font size and font style is possibly inappropriate or too large for this map, but that again is down to yourself to choose something that is appropriate. It's recommended for this task that you possibly use the font style Helvetica regular and the point size to be 8. And you can continue this on all of the roads and paths that you wish to label We can even start adding text layers, names next to our symbols, and just flesh this map out a bit. I'm going to turn my base map off again, and we now need to create the background. So I'm going to create another new layer, call this one background, obviously. I'm going to draw a rectangle that goes all the way over my map, so all the elements I want to keep I'm going to draw over a rectangle over the top of. I'm going to go to my swatches panel, and again, if your swatches panel isn't there, you can go to view swatches to enable it. And I'm going to create a new swatch down here. I'm going to set its colour to be C0 M1 Y2 K1 and hit OK. And I'm now going to go back to my layers and make sure that my background layer is above my base map but below my other elements. So now we have our map created and we could continue adding elements to this. We need to now create a visual identifier for what each of these represent. And the way you do that on a map is with a key. So with our background layer selected, I'm just going to create a white ellipse. So a white rectangle. So let's just choose a white colour. I'm just going to hold shift to draw a white square in the bottom corner, like so. And I'm actually going to give this an outline. So I'm just going to give this a stroke colour. Just so I can sort of see what I'm working with, and I'm going to give that stroke a colour of a kind of darkish grey, maybe for now. I can always again go back and tweak the colour palettes as I see fit. So now I have this sort of rectangle down here. I'm going to use the type tool, and I'm going to just draw a box. So I'm going to go to my layers and just create a new layer and call this key. And then with my type tool selected and the key layer also selected, I'm just going to draw a box, a text box. I'm going to type in key. I'm going to make the scale of this type to be around the 18 point mark, but again, this is down to your personal preference. I'm just going to change this font to be Helvetica. And I'm just going to go Helvetica New Bold for myself. But again, that's down to your own taste. So we need to identify each of our elements in our scene. So we have our roads. So we have a main road, a second road, green area, railway road, and campus alongside our rivers. So we need to be able to identify all this and any symbols that we create. So I'm just going to create another text box in this key area. And I'm going to change this font to be just irregular, and I'm going to make this smaller. And I'm going to start adding in my elements. So adding in each of the names of the elements that we've created one by one. And again, you can customize this to look how you feel would be most appropriate. So I'm just going to draw a series of paths. So for my main road, I know that my main road is a thick yellow, and I can make my life easier by making sure that my main road layer is unlocked. And with my path I've just created for the main road selected, I can use the eyedropper tool and select that path, and it will copy the properties and color of that onto my path. I can do the same for my secondary roads, so I could actually duplicate this path and position this next to my secondary road tag, and again using the eyedropper and making sure my secondary road layer is not locked, I can copy the properties of that path onto this new path. It won't work with the railway because that's a brush, so I'm just going to again draw paths to the right size. With that path selected and my brushes option open, I can just add the railway brush to it. Likewise with my river, I'm just going to keep everything selected, and again I'm just going to use the eyedropper to copy the properties of that across. Now my green area, I'm going to actually just draw a rectangle, keeping the width to the same of my paths, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool again on my canvas field just to copy the properties of that. So now I should have this sort of hashed rectangle that represents my green area. Oops, sorry, actually that's my campus, but this would also apply for the green area. So let me just duplicate that up, and I'm just going to use a green to select the green path on my shape. So let's just turn off these hatchings for a second, select the green like so, and then like we did with the other green area, I'm just going to Command C, edit, paste in place, and then choose my eyedropper tool to select this dotted pattern like so. And with my castle, I just simply want to copy any of the symbols I create as a whole and maneuver that onto my key as well. So as you can sort of see, you can start to build up your map and change its visual style to suit your intended purpose. This is a very simplistic map by all accounts, but doesn't mean that simple couldn't be designer. So you could try changing colours, you could try changing the way that the symbols are represented, although there is a kind of iconography that is established with what, for example, a hospital is, or a place of historic interest, but that is up to you to play about with. And I hope that this sort of Illustrator tutorial has been of use and largely has helped with getting your head around using the pen tool and adjusting paths. Thank you for watching.